I get welcome back to the show. Repeat guests for listeners who are wondering why we're a bit giddy is that we finally figured out how to work Zoom between the three of us. It's one of those days.
It worked.
I think what I want to ask you, because I don't know if we covered it the last time you were on the show, is kind of giving us a brief backstory of where you're from, where you grew up, and then if architecture was something of a passion of yours from a young age, or did you stumble on it later, or how did that work?
Yeah. So I grew up in a neighborhood outside of Los Angeles called Torrance, here in Southern California. And architecture was certainly not something that was on my radar as a kid. I was a senior in high school and found myself, or a junior in high school, having to kind of pick a major. And all I knew was that there was something slightly intriguing about the idea that there was this profession that was simultaneously creative and technical at the same time. And so that as like a shallow understanding of the profession stood out to me. So I went to USC in downtown Los Angeles. That's where I met my wife and business partner. And I remember being just ridiculously intimidated my first year of architecture school because I was sitting next to students who had far more experience in the industry, either through their parents or just through being exposed to it at an early age. And so that was at first like terrifying. But the good news is I also enjoyed it. I also just love the combination of conceptual thinking with physics, poetic musings with function and client service. So I found that I think I just got really lucky in picking a major that the education, at least, was really enjoyable for me.
Oh, that's awesome. That is luck, because there are a lot of majors out there. I think it's really difficult for a 17 or 16-year-old to choose their life career, and the odds of it working out are maybe not that high.
Totally. I feel so fortunate.
Did any of your parents do anything in creative? Were they in graphic design or anything design related, or?
You know, they're both very resourceful, scrappy individuals, but neither have a college education, neither are into design. Both of them were probably looking at these Cartesian planes that I was creating in first year architecture school thinking, wait, I thought you were going to design houses. So, it was a fortunate leap into a black hole. But what's funny is like, I grew up and I was obsessed with literally arts and crafts. Just things that young kids would be into. And what surprised me was how much, let's say, my background in like just a hobbyist woodworker would come in handy in architecture school, or the fact that I loved using hot glue guns and foam core cutters. I thought like, oh wow, like this is a little bit of an advantage in architecture school just because it's such a crafty profession, at least when I entered architecture school. Of course, we were doing digital modeling, and that was a miserable learning curve. But there was still a lot of this hands-on making. Model making in particular was something that I just had such a passion for.
So when you were a kid, you were making stuff out of wood.
Oh, totally. Yeah. We and this is nothing impressive, nothing portfolio worthy, but it's a garage that was messy and full of tools and just full of experimentation. And I promise you, at the time, there was no kind of connection between like, oh, that's architecture, or that's at least the ingredients of a creative process. There was none of that. But it was like while being ridiculously intimidated in architecture school, there was at least a familiarity of like, oh, okay, this wood shop thing, like, cool. I know how to find my way around this room.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like that early background and just making stuff out of wood, making stuff with hot glue guns, somehow was helpful, not just in the skill set of being able to use those skills in school, but like the thinking or understanding of just how things maybe want to naturally fit together or not fit together, if that makes sense?
Absolutely. So I think that there's probably a baseline kind of fundamental understanding of assemblies and components and parts. I think the bigger part of it for me, though, was just a kind of a fearlessness at creating. I think that's something that my parents did a good job in kind of preparing me for was I had the opportunity to be involved in a lot of robotics competitions, and just where iteration was the assumed baseline of like trying and failing and testing things and creating, right, little composites and then destroying them and watching them fail. I think that whatever's happening in the brain while we are testing ideas that are wholly imperfect and then doing a little bit of a post-mortem analysis, I think that has so much relevancy to even the design process that we do today. And I feel like I'm always trying to encourage my staff to have that level of fearlessness of just trying things and kind of separating the creative brain from the editing brain. In my opinion, it's so hard to do those two things simultaneously. And I don't know, I think that's one of the joys of architecture school, is that it just kind of puts you through enough repetitions of creating and analyzing. And it's so hard to kind of see the end of the novel when you sit down to write. But if you can enjoy an iterative process, I think you get pretty far.
Oh, that's really well said. I like the kind of separating between the creative or the creation aspect and then the editing, because I feel like if you try to do the editing too heavily every 30 seconds, you don't get anywhere. It's too stifling.
You don't get anywhere. You get so stuck. Yeah, you'll abort an idea before it even has an opportunity to defend itself.
Yeah, I think that's a great lesson. It's like you almost have to say to yourself, okay, I know that this idea I have for this scheme has its flaws. I don't care. I'm just going to go forward and see what it produces. And then after it gets to a certain level of completeness, then you go back, you edit, and you say, okay, yeah, I see that it brought new things perhaps, or it wasn't good as I anticipated.
I mean, David, that's probably the most common hurdle that I see young designers face is just feeling stuck because they're editing ideas before they're even created.
Do you find, and this is jumping way over now to where you are in your practice, we're just going to quickly skip by a few things.
I was going to ask
go ahead.
Maybe something before we do the big jump.
We can stick with the story.
You're a very strong team leader and team player, and I was wondering where that comes from. Do you have siblings? Have you been practicing sports when you were a kid, where that spirit was kind of like in you back then? Like, where does it come from?
I do have a lot of siblings. So I have 3 younger siblings and 2 older half siblings. And one of the things that I do love about my job, but I think I discovered it late, and this is a difference in architecture school. I had a love-hate relationship with team projects, and I think that's by design, right? There's just a tension, and we're all expected to do the same thing, but we have very different skill sets. And one of the things that was so life-giving about starting my own practice was that I could surround myself with individuals who had truly complementary rather than redundant strengths. And so I could go on my own journey of saying, what am I truly meant to do? What's my unique ability? And who are the people I need to surround myself with that I can help them go farther than they could on their own, and they're going to help me go farther than I could on my own. And so I think that I discovered a passion for teamwork. That's such a trite phrase these days, but I'm literally obsessed with what are the ingredients that make a team outperform other teams. So we give a lot of thought and practice and tinkering to that in our firm, but I'm not able to kind of pinpoint something in architecture school or my internships that kind of sparked that. I mean, I love being part of a big family, but it was really something I discovered later when I just started working with people who were very different than me, and I saw kind of the magic of the way that 1 + 1 was way more than 2.
Interesting. So you're naturally gifted, is what you're saying.
No, I don't know. Architecture school was such a strange solo sport, right? There's something, you pin up your material on the wall and everyone's trying to stand out. And I get it. Like that's the way it is. But what's so cool about these, if we're going to do a real project, there are hundreds of minds that need to meld into the project. And I think just like a recognition of that felt felt really life-giving for me. It's like, okay, like this is from the beginning a team sport.
I think it's a very good point. Like, you're right. In school, it's very much not an introspection, but kind of like discovering who you are, who you want to be as an architect, therefore very solo. But when you get into practice, because there's just so much to do, it's almost impossible for one person to do it all. And if it happens, it's a miracle, right? It's a good point. It's a good point.
I mean, it's kind of funny. I've said it before, and practitioners would probably be screaming as I was listening to this, but in some ways, being an architecture student is harder. Well, one, because everything's new and it's just rough, right? Especially the first few years, but also you have to do everything by yourself. And you were asked in the later years to be successful in all the different ways architecture has to be successful. And it's just really, really difficult.
But it's all fictitious, though.
I know. But, whereas in the professional setting, you rely on other people, and it can be maybe in a way easier.
I think you have an argument that you can make there. To say it differently, I think there are certain types of designers for whom school is going to be a very difficult arena to like truly thrive in, right? Because you need to be like a Swiss Army knife at like so many things to kind of pull off the life cycle of a project. But if you have a strong, unique ability, and you can be part of a team that leverages that unique ability, like life might be way more enjoyable on the professional side. And I don't know, I feel like that aligns with the argument that you're testing out of like, yeah, it might be harder in school.
So when you guys, so for some background, so people know, how large is your office now? Like, how many employees do you have?
We're a team of 17. So 17. Some of us are licensed architects, others are on their way to becoming that. And we focus on doing homes, businesses, restaurants, bars in the greater Los Angeles area.
That's awesome. And so how quickly or how soon after school did you start your own practice? Did you work at another office for a period of time?
I did. So I worked at an office for 5 years. And in that time, got my license. And it was shortly after getting my license that I had a mentor tap me on the shoulder and say, hey, you're not running on all cylinders. And at the time, I didn't quite know what that meant. What I know now that he meant was I loved being a project manager, being able to design really cool projects. But there was something in me that I think was meant to also work on the premise of the project, the strategy of the project, do the team building, kind of culture building within the studio. And those were all the parts that were both very intimidating at first, but I found that I really did care about it. So I just kind of like got my license, trusted that he wasn't wrong. And my wife, Krista, and we just started doing small projects. So by now we're 5 years out of an undergraduate education, and we're doing the most predictable bathroom renovations, front porch additions, pool renovations, and we just started cranking those out while trying to squeeze design into them whenever we found an opportunity.
Is it, we get that question often, like being a couple in business and in life, is it difficult? Like, how did you work together before on projects before you decided to start your own practice, or you just kind of like took a gamble on it?
Yeah, this is probably a big theme for you, I would imagine, but it is for me as well. I don't know, on the spectrum of individuals who like to keep their life compartmentalized, I'm on the other side of the spectrum. I want it to be just one big party. So, I met my wife, Krista, in architecture school. So in a way, that's all we've always known, is just working on fun, creative things. And so I know that doesn't work for everybody. And I totally respect that there's this more, maybe time-tested division of work and life that people enjoy. But for us, it's just one big thing. I work with a lot of really close friends in my business. Obviously, I'm married to my business partner. A lot of my clients are people that I have direct relationships with. So I don't know. For me, the whole thing is going to be successful or the whole thing's going to fail. It's at least the way that my life is set up. It's not like I'm going to have one healthy and one unhealthy spot because it's all together.
So you put all your eggs in the same basket.
It's working.
I know,
That's
right?
good.
That's not diversity. We'll see.
I think because we get that question, as Marina said, fairly often. But I think if it works, it works, and if it doesn't, then it doesn't. It's pretty, I can't imagine there's like a halfway point, because we know plenty of people who are couples and they've tried it and they're like, nope, not doing that again, didn't work. And it's very clear cut. Yeah, it's fine.
Well,
Yeah. I mean, I respect it. They try it.
Yeah, and in a way, like if one works too, like I feel like it could bring a lot to the other side. So if they are more intertwined, I think the pluses are even bigger,
Well, I think so, but we're biased.
Yeah, we're biased.
So you guys are 17 people, and so what's interesting for listeners is that we had you on the show 3 or 4 years ago. 3 or 4 years ago, which is an odd. I feel like it was last year, but it wasn't. It was quite some time ago in a sense. So if you can mentally go back to 3.5 years ago, like I'm wondering how your office has evolved and changed in that time. Have you guys intentionally tried to get different types of projects? I guess this is like an update on Laney LA.
Yeah, so a lot can change in 3 to 4 years when a firm is young, right? If you've got a giant cruise ship, it's just gonna keep heading the same direction. We're a small, nimble team, and one of the things that I love about it is every year it is radically different. We've been around for coming up on 9 years, and so to rewind 3 to 4 years, I was happy with the volume of projects that we were doing. Every year they were getting more and more exciting. I was happy with the talent that we were attracting to our firm. The problem was there was no sense of cohesion between our projects, if I'm being honest. And the diversity of the aesthetic was something that was getting a little bit out of control. That's a design challenge. We meet every 90 days to decide objectives, and we meet every year to really chart the course for the entire year. And so we kind of set the intention of clarifying what we want to stand for. What are the sort of projects that we can say yes to and say no to? And as our reputation became a little bit stronger, we were able to have a more tight client and project filter. I know that sounds very predictable and classic, but it made a big difference for us to responsibly recognize that we were not for everybody and everybody is not for us. And so there was no overnight change, but as we do fast forward 3 to 4 years, I'm very proud to say that our portfolio has a far greater sense of cohesion, and also we're more diverse in our project typology. So we used to only do practically renovations and new construction houses, but now we have a thriving commercial sector, and it's really fun to see that breathe new life into our studio. And so we might have a young designer who's working on 2 houses and a restaurant and an adaptive reuse project. And that mix, I think, is life-giving. It kind of, I really like that diversity in that mix.
So I think that's interesting. So the diversity of project types has increased, but and a moment ago you were talking about being more particular with the clients and projects you take on. So the filtering, let's call it, is not to do. Is it because of the project type, or is it more to do with design alignment? So
the more diverse typologies has only come in the last 12 months.
Okay.
But over the last 3 years, we have been really editing the sort of clients that we accept and trying to refine the type of work that we produce. And so we've, it's easy to say, I think it's hard to do, but we've been just committing to every project, wanting to have a strong connection to nature, right? So a lot of our homes have a really strong perspective on either a courtyard or pocket gardens or some like relationship with the landscape. we've also decided that we want our homes to really be known for material craft. And so we always try to find some ingredient to try to push farther than you might expect in that typology, whether it's the way that the wood cedar is connected to one another or the way that a scalloped concrete is expressed. And so it's just been a journey of trying to refine what we're standing for, which I think can be a challenge for young offices when just existing can kind of feel exciting enough.
Was it a challenge for you guys to expand to those other typologies when you had been focusing on primarily residential?
Yeah, so we focused on homes because those were the most accessible to a young office. Our transition to include other typologies was we wanted to leverage our familiarity with like the coastal towns south of Los Angeles. And so our pitch to these developers was, hey, we're very familiar with this jurisdiction. A lot of the ingredients that we become experts in with custom homes are also ingredients of, let's say, a luxury office. And so we think that we have enough overlap to responsibly offer some value there. And so it wasn't like it was a new jurisdiction and an entirely different typology. We were trying to see it as something that was kind of a spin-off of something we had gotten good at. So it is an experiment. We're certainly not as efficient on some of these newer typologies, but I think that the excitement that I just sense in the studio at having these new challenges has been really rewarding.
I think it's a common question for a lot of offices, younger and older, if they want to get into a different type of architecture, how do you do that? Were you guys always taking on, maybe not always, but for a period of time before this last 12 months, taking on smaller commercial projects kind of more at random? Or was it a kind of a, not cold turkey, the opposite of cold turkey, just like a straight new break into something different?
There was always a few small projects lingering that were non-residential, but those happened to find us rather than us. I mean, I just literally reached out to my network and I started to announce that we had the intention of diversifying the sort of work that we're working on. So for the past 12 months, it has been an intentional outreach. And I think that's the difference. And so that led to 5 new commercial projects, which we're very proud of. They're not done, right? So we can't test our success yet, but at least we're on that track.
I've seen some beautiful renderings of some incredible office spaces, and I am very jealous to the person who's going to have a desk there.
Thank you. Yeah, it's so fun. So now a lot of those projects are now in design development and permitting. And so now the real work starts to try to execute it with excellence.
And so you decided to kind of open up to those typologies. Was that something that you always had in the back of your mind, but you were kind of saving for a little bit later in the office's journey? Or is that something that just you discovered would make sense?
The real calculation was, I was looking at how do I recruit and retain the best architects that I can? And I love doing custom homes. I think we have some of the best clients that I could ever dream of. So it's very fulfilling for me to do a home. And these are complex, massive structures. It kind of satisfies all itches that I would ever have. But I just think that in our industry, I started to get questions around, where I'm reading in between the lines, where you might get a question like, do you only do homes? And I realized that for these young designers or even experienced architects, they don't want to be limited. And so I thought, okay, if I'm going to create a destination, if I'm going to create like a studio that people want to be at and stay at, I'll probably have a better chance of hiring and retaining better talent if I don't only do one thing. That was honestly at the top of my list as to why I thought let's try to diversify.
It's very, very interesting because one of the things I remember from our last recording with you, and it's clear now, is how much thought and care and love goes into you thinking about the office and the people itself, right? And I think what's fascinating from a business owner standpoint, that it's not to say that business owners who are focused on that don't care about design or aren't involved in design, but that I think you said ingredients in the office is what is going to lead to a success. So you have to think about it, I guess.
Correct, and I recognize that's not for everybody, and I see that is a type of design thinking. It is a type of problem solving, and it might not have a visual component immediately, but it certainly leads to more thoughtful work. I do have the privilege of working with individuals who I would consider thoroughbred designers, like designers, and I think we make a good team because I do tend to personally lean a little bit more of a thinker and versus a designer. And hopefully it's that combination that makes us good fits for one another.
I love how introspective you are, because I feel like that's a necessary thing to become successful with pretty much anything.
Well, and it's easy also to just kind of like get trapped in the everyday grind of designing projects without stepping back and thinking a little bit, bigger picture.
So easy. Yeah. Believe me, we're all susceptible to that because the volume of incoming challenges is so incredible that it's very easy to stay there. So one of the things that helps is we have this habit of taking what we call a clarity break, or just stepping back and with the journal, just writing. We always step out of the office every 90 days to reflect on what's working and what's not working. That's another tool that I love. It's just with no anxiety, just saying, hey, these are the things that are working and these are the things that are not working, right? And which of the things on that not working list do we think are winnable and significant, right? There might be things that we want to change that we just can't do that yet. And there might be other things that are easy to fix, but are going to not make any dent to the business. So I just love thinking, okay, what improvement do we want to make? And so 89 days out of a quarter, we're focusing on designing projects, but at least one day out of the quarter, we zoom out to dedicate the entire office to thinking about the way that we practice.
Do you guys have I don't know what their title would be called, but like an office manager consultant or business development consultant? A lot of architecture offices and businesses in general hire somebody, a third-party person, to come in on a regular basis or once every month or something and kind of advise, some of the things you're talking about, like you should do this brick, you should do X, Y, and Z.
We don't have any. So I do have a few mentors that I pay to talk to regularly. And I don't have an advisor, but I do have a facilitator. This is someone who every 90 days meets with my leadership team and I, and just kind of like plays referee in order to help us interact in more healthy ways and just do good work. So it's still my leadership team and I deciding what is our focus and why, but the facilitator is overseeing the meeting and making sure that it's a balanced and healthy conversation.
That makes sense. I think it'd be really difficult if I'm sure you would do a great job, but if you're the one running it, it's like a little bit lopsided.
Well, yeah, even if somebody was talented enough to do that, they're using some of their brain just to facilitate rather than participate. And I just want to be able to be a full participant in those meetings.
Yeah. Going back to what you were talking about with one of the changes that occurred the last 3 or 4 years was being more specific about the designs of the projects being more coherent. This is my interpretation of what you're saying. Do you think that reading of your work and choosing a direction forward could have only happened once your office had been old enough and done enough projects to have that reflection? Does that make sense?
It does. I think there's many ways of doing it, and I admire offices that, at least from the outside, appear to get it right the first time. So they appear to not exist, and they exist in a very well-branded and thoughtful way. That's very impressive to me. I guess I was afraid of it being only an intellectual exercise if it happened too soon. And so I wanted to, I guess what feels just so natural to me is to try a lot of things, identify what things work, and just do more of the things that work. And so, we had, let's say, a body of work, but you're right, it wasn't cohesive, but we could pin it on the wall, zoom back and say, what was our favorite projects and why? What are the common themes in these projects? What is this teaching us as we zoom out and look at it? So I think it's possible to launch with clarity. The truth is, I just was struggling to survive in the beginning. And so that was not at the top of my list. Maybe it should have been, right? I was just worried about finding my first client and trying to deliver on promises.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a single right answer. I know there's definitely not, and everyone does it differently. It's very circumstantial. It just depends on everyone's particular circumstance, and it's just a general question I'm always wondering about because I see from a distance some folks who are hyper focused, and sometimes it even happens in school. Students choose their thing, year 3. I'm like, you need to calm down. You need to be a little bit more open to different things, or they choose it after year 2 of practicing. I'm like, there's a big world. You could probably
and I think also it needs to come from a sincere place, to mean something. You cannot just pick something that's trendy and make it your shtick. Like you're going to be limited at some point.
Totally. And I think that's what our profession can learn from the kind of the larger tech startup world is this, why would we believe that design thinking is powerful, right? Testing and iterating, but then like in our business, we would expect us to get it right the first time, right? That to me seems incoherent. And so when I think about like startup culture and doing MVPs, minimum viable products, the thought is, hey, we're probably going to be wrong at first. We're going to survive being wrong at first, but we're going to do a lot of iterations in order to constantly get closer to something that is truly valuable and significant to the market. So I think that's the way we handle project design. It's also the way we handle team design and business design. And so for me, that's at least coherent.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. I like that perspective a lot. And it's kind of a more zoomed out perspective. It's one you have to have thinking more in the long term and being okay with that. I feel like a lot of the times when folks want to niche maybe too much and things like that is because they're trying to take shortcuts, which I get, but things take time. Like with our podcast, with our office, with anything else, you just got to try it. It's like, try it and see. If it doesn't work out in a year, well, then we switch it.
Well, and it needs to grow, right? Yeah. So you cannot, start at an adult age. Like you got to start young and you got to age. You can't just fast forward time.
That's so true. Yeah.
There was another thing too. I think last time we saw you, you guys were trying to do more of your own interiors on your project. Is that something that you're still pushing more and more to happen?
It is. Thank you for remembering that. Yes, so my disclaimer is we work with some pretty incredible third-party interior designers, and I love that collaboration, and I'm not like holding my breath, like waiting for us to take over their scope. I genuinely feel it's a privilege, just like it is for me to interact with a gifted landscape architect or even general contractor for that matter. But yes, on more and more of our projects, our clients experience the residential design with us from the architectural perspective, and we just then don't stop. We take it all the way to the finish line. And I think I know you both well enough to know that I think you're big believers in not having any separation between the exterior and the interior scope. There's something just remarkable when a project can be authored and conceived in a holistic way, where it's not like space first, furniture second, right? How do you even separate those two things, right? A space doesn't even function without furniture. And so to conceive of the entire concept as being something that is built layer by layer together is something that I believe in. And I would say about 1/3 of our projects, we get to do it all. And there's something remarkably fun about that. It was intimidating at first, but now we have several years of projects under our belts, and I hope we can grow that division.
Yeah, that's well put. And I think it's tough sometimes. I like your disclaimer because it does highlight this part of the conversation of, well, for people on the outside might be wondering, well, if you do interior design, so does that mean you're not going to work with an interior designer? And it's like, no, it's not about
Totally.
that. It's just about creating that end result that feels good. And however we choose to get there is another thing, but as long as we get there.
I love that. Yeah, and a part of my disclaimer is very self-serving. I get incredible referrals from interior designers, right? And I want them to know that I'm going to refer them too. So hopefully we have a blue ocean mindset of like, there's enough work for everybody. I just want the client to have the design team that's best for them, right? So some of my clients have said, I really value the different perspective that a third-party interior designer is going to bring, right? So a bigger room full of people, it's fun for them. Awesome. For other clients, they love the simplicity of like, let's just design it all here right now with these minds. And I just want the team structure to reflect the values that my clients bring.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I mean, I think it all comes down to what the client decides to do because it is their final decision. But I think on the subject of whether or not it's an interior designer and an architect who are separate or they're all combined, I think that might be one decision where it really is just about comfort and the perspective the client has. Like you said it perfectly. Some folks, they like the idea of having it bundled for whatever reason. And other folks that really disturbs them for whatever reason. And it's like, fine.
Yeah. I think a lot of it has to do with like preconceived notions and trust. And so I think all my clients trust me, but I can be real and detect that some of them love that a different set of eyes is going to be reviewing all the rooms with the opportunity to give critiques of something that I might have missed, right?
Yeah.
Some of my clients love that that feels safe to them. And that's why they go that direction. And I can support them. I can just help them build that team in a way that tries to avoid some of the common gaps in scope when two parties are maybe not connected like they should be.
Yeah. And unfortunately, that is a pretty common narrative that we hear from a lot of people. And it's just a bummer because it's not good for anybody in the end. It doesn't feel good for anybody either.
Yeah, you're right.
So I'm kind of curious, like once this evolution of you guys becoming more aware of the types of designs you're producing and having some greater coherency and objective or mission or however you would describe it, has that impacted the, I guess you call it, design process that takes place within the office? Do you guys have a very clear, I don't know, structure to that in any way? Is everyone left to complete their own their completely different devices to do whatever they want?
No. So I think that on the spectrum, there are studios that probably love the chaos and the freedom that might come with everything being a one-off. Personally, I lean to the other side, which is a belief that discipline brings freedom. So we have well-documented processes, but we do force ourselves to rewrite those processes quite often. So they are fresh. 2 years ago, we brought on a studio director. He has like world-class pedigree and experience. And so with him, we rewrote our discovery process, our concept phase process, even our schematic design process. We really rethought those from the ground up. So the timing was good. We were rediscovering what it meant to target a more cohesive body of work. We brought on a new leader who had convictions of his own. And so we rebuilt those processes from the ground up. Now we're actually focusing on improving our design development and construction document processes. So we're not throwing them out completely, but we are like taking a fine-tooth comb to saying where do we experience friction? Why is that friction the case? Is it because of a lack of training? Is it a lack of knowledge? Is it an immature process? So we're working on kind of strengthening that system, and we're kind of giving ourselves permission not to reinvent the early design phase processes. We're going to like let that just be the way it is for now. And in another year, we're probably going to flip back and revisit those.
So what is the process within one of those phases, like concept design, for example? Like, how do you, from an senior level office management perspective, distill or communicate a certain process while still allowing the freedom that's required, particularly in that phase?
David, that is $1 million question.
I know, right? that's the one.
we use the terms loose and tight. And that's like, if you were to like spend a day in our office, you're like, why do you use that term so much? It's because we're trying to determine, of the small tasks within a phase, where is it beneficial to be extremely prescriptive? That's tight, like do this thing in this way with this tool, right? We don't want innovation. And where do we want to be loose? Meaning, explore these possibilities or accomplish this objective with any tool, with any approach, with any map. And so we're trying to develop, at the end of the day, we have 6 phases. Each phase has 10 milestones, and each milestone probably has a checklist of 10 to 20 things.
Wow.
It's easy enough to get there. I think the magic is when we talk about, let's say, writing a design narrative, what part of that process do we want to be repetitive and streamlined, and what part of it do we want to like resist any form of putting someone in a box? And so that's what we're working through, is trying to figure out how, which of these tasks are tight and which of these tasks are loose. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. It's one of the questions I'm always thinking about, because I feel you're right. There's some offices, and it's just not just, because it's not, I don't mean to say a negative way, but it's kind of chaos, and that's their thing. It's like everyone is
it's just a beautiful thing, right?
Just craziness, and their offices are filled with a bunch of stuff, and it's just madness, and that's like what they do. But I'm also very intrigued by this idea. I think especially once you get to a certain point, a certain size of office with a certain number of employees, that some amount of structure is required for many reasons, right? For efficiency, let's say, but also to more greatly ensure that good things are going to come out of this business, right? This business with a bunch of people. Do you find that the process that you guys kind of write down and formalize is very heavily informed by the specific people that are your employees and working with you?
There's this little saying, structure first, people second, or process first, people second. So of course, it's easy to say, we try to make it individual agnostic, and even tool agnostic. But at the end of the day, we are writing processes to be used by specific types of individuals who have specific types of experience. And so that's where, at least for us, we try to differentiate between a process and a procedure. Not to get too technical, but if someone really knows how to do their job, I just want to give them a loose process. Like, hey, just remember that these 10 things need to be done within design development. If someone's new to their position, I want to give them a more tight procedure, which is excellence in this milestone looks like these 20 things done in that order. And so based upon a different person and their level of experience, they're going to need a different tool set. So we are trying to modulate those. Our team is young, and I'm kind of on a mission to try to get some more gray hair into my team. But for now, we're doing a lot with a relatively fresh set of individuals.
I like that.
Gray hair will come. Just reassure everyone.
It happens quickly.
It happens way quicker than you think.
What's the process been like for your team? I in a boutique studio, do you attempt to document processes, or that's too cumbersome at the moment?
It's interesting. It's a mixture of both. Whether or not we take action and formalize things is firstly dependent on how busy our schedules are. When
Right,
things, if,
right.
you know, like sometimes there are fires that need to be put out, and it just, you know, we have to give priority to that in a certain way.
Yeah.
I would say that generally, compared to maybe most offices who are comparable to us, we tend to think about these things more than most others, and we probably formalize them more than others. Now, whether or not the things we write down end up being what we feel like is written in stone, and that's going to be repeated for the next 2 years or repeated for the last 2 years, that has nothing to do with it, right? The reinvention you mentioned, like we do it because we feel like it's important to kind of keep clean the thinking and be aware of what we're doing next to what we've written down. But it doesn't mean that we are not flexible, if that makes sense.
I feel like you've hit on what maybe might be like the real value of this whole conversation, which is just being aware of how we approach certain problems, right? Whether or not it goes on a one pager and whether or not that one pager is reused, maybe that's not the point, is it? But just that we're not caught in a state of being unaware of the way that we're approaching these challenges. Just to zoom out and say, what process are we using right now?
Yeah. And I've always been very big on understanding process for the sake of, not even to do with efficiency, although that would be one of the gains, but more like I just want to know how we can more greatly ensure a really great outcome, even though the outcomes can be different every time. And then also because I feel it's important to be able to communicate these things to outsiders, basically prospective clients.
I love that. That's cool.
Yeah. I otherwise awesome. It's like, just trust us because it's going to be different. And that's a hard pitch to sell when you're our age, right?
Well, we are a work in progress.
I'm with you. Very cool.
I remember, I guess 3 or 4 years ago, you guys were, doing like 3D, like printed 3D models and like those extruded floor plan PDF that could turn into kind of a tool for people to navigate. Are you still using those types of technology during the process or to communicate to clients? Yeah,
we are. So we've this year had a resurgence of 3D printing, which has been a lot of fun. So 3D printing, when you and I last connected, it was all about this like beautiful little dollhouse to represent the kind of literal project to scale. Now it's much more part of a design process where we are 3D printing components of projects and drawing on them and breaking them and even 3D printing little details for projects. So
cool.
There's been a resurgence of that. There's also, I think I've just kind of like fallen out of love with this like plastic filament as an object. And so we've been starting to kind of rebuild models the old fashioned way. And it takes like way too much time and energy, kind of like nauseating. But the beauty of the model is, I think, far superior. So one of the recent ones that I just posted was we do a 3D print for a project. We then put it in a box. We fill the box with silicone. So then we have a negative mold. Then we pour concrete or cast into the mold. And the weight is different. The texture is different. It has this like timeless quality that I think just looks better on a bookshelf. So we've kind of gone that direction. We still use ArchiCAD as our primary BIM software. It is not the only software we use, especially in the early design phases. We're using tons of software in the design phase, but ArchiCAD still has the BIMX app, which is ridiculously powerful, and that's still the way that we're running door schedules and building our construction documents. And so it's not a perfect system, but it is one that we continue to invest in.
Yeah, and actually I want to talk about the models, but on the note of BIM, because I think we just put out an episode last week about that. So in your office, in the early design phases, you guys are using other softwares to do quick studies. Are you guys using like Rhino and SketchUp or 3ds or?
Yeah, so when I started the office, I had a very tight approach. It was use ArchiCAD in this way to do the design. And I was close enough to the process where maybe that was fine. Now we have a much more loose approach where yes, Rhino is the main alternative design tool that we iterate in. But it eventually, in like late schematic design, early design development, gets rebuilt in ArchiCAD. And it has, part of it has to do with complex geometries and be better organized in other softwares. And part of it is just, I love the symbolic break of, in schematic design, let's thrash, like, let's go wide, like, let's be messy. But then eventually we just kind of like draw a line and say, okay, we're going to rebuild something now in a BIM software. What is that thing? And let's have grid lines, and let's have layers, and let's have an NCIS standard. And I like that mental shift that comes a little bit later in the project.
That's a really, really good point. The mental break and the break and what it means from a kind of creative perspective to have that moment, because I think the reasons for using programs like Rhino or SketchUp early are obvious because you can experiment, but going a layer deeper, like you're describing, to say, because I also find that, like, I know some offices who use ArchiCAD all the way through from the very beginning, which I'm always impressed by, and no doubt, and they produce good work. So they have the people who are working in that program, they're a master at ArchiCAD, and they can push it and be flexible. But even with as much as I love ArchiCAD compared to Revit, it's still a heavy program. There's a lot to know, and it's difficult to give yourself that mental, how you described it, the freedom when you should be keeping clean when maybe that's not what you should be worrying about at all in like concept design, for example.
Exactly right. I think there's too many constraints to demand that the team be clean in the early phases. So even a team that might use ArchiCAD from the very beginning, I still think I can make a strong argument for being messy in the beginning, right? Then having a clear line in the sand that says, okay, let's rebuild it, right? We want to go fast, far, and wide in the beginning. And that's a different mindset than what we're trying to do as we get ready to turn on engineers. Yeah.
And it might actually be the most efficient to have that break. So, because there's something, this is like nerding out. There's something very like amazing about a new computer file. It's like when the snow just fell, you're like, it's perfect. Or maybe everything's going to be super tidy when I build this model.
After 3 days, that's it.
Well, yeah, no. But you're carrying over legacy stuff. That's when it gets messy, and I don't know. It's a mental weight on one's shoulders, I feel.
No, I think that's a strong argument. Yeah.
So you guys did projects in places like Tahiti, Cambodia, and pretty much all over California.
Yeah. So that's been one of my favorite parts. Our clients in Los Angeles are now taking us to their favorite place to escape. So Mammoth and Tahoe and Sacramento and Truckee, right? These lovely like resort areas. So that has been so fun because sometimes the clients live here, sometimes they're repeat clients. For those who are not familiar with architecture on the beach in Southern California, they look like shoe boxes. They're 3 stories tall. Your neighbor is 4.5 feet away from you. They're these little, tall, skinny lots. And there's plenty of opportunity for design, and we kill ourselves like inserting courtyards and trees. But to have a client then come to you and say, I've got 22 acres in San Luis Obispo, it's such a dream. So yeah, we've turned on maybe a half dozen projects at these semi-destination areas, which has been fun. The Cambodia project was the way that we started our office. That was a pro bono project for student housing. And then the Tahiti project was a small design sprint for like a little eco hotel bungalow. Again, in the early phases, I was taking everything I can get my hands on. So I haven't yet had an opportunity to do another one of those.
But are you thinking like what would be the sweet spot? Would it be to focus only in California? Would you be open to do it in other states or in other countries?
I think so. My team keeps reminding me not to limit my thinking, so I appreciate that. I tend to bring more of the practical side, so I'm getting my license in some other Western states in the United States, because there are opportunities in Mammoth and Nevada in particular that we are chasing. So I think that there's something lovely about when you do a primary residence, the stakes are so high, right? We're making decisions that feel so permanent. When you do a vacation home, there's this spirit of adventure and playfulness and like, let's do something that we're going to love 2 weeks out of the year. And I know that can sound to some folks a little bit excessive, but there's something about a miniature hotel / guest house that has a lighter spirit to it. And so it's like for that reason that I'm really trying to turn up those in our portfolio. It's really, really a fun typology.
Yeah.
It's interesting because sometimes I feel like if we could tell clients, like, think about your primary residence as a vacation home, they will probably have more fun or more appreciation, right?
Amen. I totally agree. I mean, just the bathrooms alone that we're designing in a vacation home are more adventurous, right? It's more about the experience and the separation. And I think it's because, there's some pretty phenomenal world-class hotel chains that a lot of our clients are going to that are challenging notions of what home should be.
Yeah.
The hospitality space is interesting. Who was that did that project? Rick Joy did one recently.
Oh my gosh.
The one in Mexico.
It was not super recently, but it was recently. Yeah.
I mean, imagine if your primary house could feel like you live at a vacation home.
That's not a bad deal.
Exactly.
One of my other small questions is, are you still surfing in the morning before you go to work?
So the truth is, it's been a couple months. Our team had an incredible run this summer where we were in the water all the time. My oldest son was helping me get out there sometimes every day. Some of the office does surf in these kind of cold winter mornings. So I just need to get up the courage to go out there. But our office is very close to the ocean. That's kind of one of the benefits is we got showers here, and there's something kind of special about jumping in the water before work.
You guys play ping pong if you don't surf, right?
Oh my gosh, we're obsessed with ping pong. If there's anyone out there who wants to play ping pong in Hermosa Beach, I think they'd be pretty surprised. Not as how good a few of us are, the entire office plays ping pong.
Oh no!
So
that's funny.
There's my challenge to the podcast world.
Maybe you need to start a ping pong league among the architects.
You're gonna get random people showing up at your doorstep. That could be part of the interview process. If you want to work here, you gotta,
what's your ping pong
be
level?
decent.
Yeah, you got to be willing to put in the reps.
The final question for me, which I don't think we asked the last time, but we ask often now, is what is your favorite building?
Okay.
That's not necessarily one that you did of your own.
So I had the opportunity to live in and care for the Gamble House. It's in Pasadena. It's this 100-year-old craftsman home. What I love about it is I think it's one of those few pieces of architecture that can authentically be described as both timeless and timely. So when it was created, it was somehow simultaneously new and native at the same time. Ray and Charles Green invented a new California typology, this bungalow with huge overhangs and sleeping porches and open hallways. They were drawing inspiration from international sources. So it had never been done before, but somehow it was so of the place. It was like you could never imagine it anywhere else. And I just love that paradoxical unity, that dichotomy of how can something be done that's new, but feel like it always belongs there. For me, that's the bar. Can I create work that somehow feels like it has this inseparable sense of rootedness and belonging to a place and a time and a culture, but imagine 100 years later, it's still admired, or maybe admired even more. I just think that's a mind-boggling accomplishment that is pretty rare.
Yeah, that's very fascinating. So how did you end up living there? Or how long did you live there for?
Yeah. So long story short, USC used to own the house.
Yeah.
And they had a scholarship competition. So the like prize was I got to like live in the servants' quarters, and my job was to like basically do all the grunt work for the house. So I'd set up tables and chairs for all the events. It was hard work, but like 100% worth it. And as an architecture student, kind of life-changing to like inhabit a masterpiece that's usually behind a velvet rope, you know, for tours. So that was pretty formative.
That's really, really cool. I visited the house, but you know, it was an event. There was definitely a velvet rope somewhere in the house, and there's like hundreds of people like walking around. It's not the same thing.
That's pretty cool.
Well, this time flew by very quickly. Thanks so much for coming back on the show. We'll do it again in another few years and have another checkup and give us updates. This was great.
Thank you.
Cool. Thank you so much to both of you. Big fan of what you've accomplished. You built quite an incredible following and community, and so we're cheering for you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for watching this video on YouTube. If you like what we're doing, then please support our show by hitting that subscribe button and liking and commenting on our videos.
You can also find us on most of the social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We're mostly on Instagram. And you can reach out to the hotline, 213-222-6950. You can send a text message or leave a voicemail if you have any reaction to this recording, any questions you might have, or guest suggestion. Feel free to send it our way.
Cool. Thank you for watching, and see you next week.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.